Today's episode, we'll take a look at Thursday Night Football and a win for the Browns, but more importantly, a win for Jameis Winston and a win with the public. I'll explain. Brady Quinn, we get into it. He is at the shoe this weekend for Ohio State and Indiana. Who is he picking? Am I fair, unfair about my schedule complaints? And then we get into Notre Dame and a bunch of different stuff, just taking a look at the college football landscape. It's going to be awesome. We've got our alliance. Yep. Still let me do it. And we've got life advice. Okay, a little football open for you last night on the Browns win against the Steelers. All right, so I want to talk about Jameis because everybody loves this guy right now. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's the comeback story. I don't know if it's not having expectations for him. I'll admit some of the quotes, like everybody seems to love him because they're so weird. And I kind of feel like it's this one guy in our friend group that's decided to dance now. He just dances in a room and kind of looks at you while he dances. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I don't want to dance with you. And he just kind of looks at you. And other guys are like, what's going on over there? I'm like, I don't know. He just keeps dancing and he's looking at me and I want to leave. Maybe it's not that bad with the Jameis quotes, but the Browns get the win. Again, it's a Steelers team that I actually feel better about after the Baltimore win, right? Like I was a little dismissive. Great defense. Not going to trust Russell Wilson. They beat Baltimore. Felt much better about them. They almost come back last night. Spirit to their toughness. I actually, as much as I like the Baltimore win, I don't knock them a ton for a loss against the Browns. It's a division thing. It's the conditions. Kind of like the Browns last night a little bit there as well. Just coming in, kind of one of those NFL head-to-head things. I do think it's kind of interesting, though, like in college football, be like, well, they won the head-to-head. It's kind of like, well, what's the point of playing if we're not going to look at the head-to-head? The NFL has a little of that, but, I mean, sometimes you're just going to lose to inferior teams. And in basketball, if the Hawks beat the Celtics, nobody's like, well, dude, they won the head-to-head, so it's their East. Dan Orlovsky over at ESPN caused a bit of a ruckus just by saying he didn't think that Pittsburgh was a Super Bowl contender and that you couldn't live on field goals, despite the fact that they lived on field goals in that Baltimore game. But I agree with him. Like, I get his point. Like, it worked, but they haven't been really good in the red zone. Better last night. I think it really has to more to do with the AFC landscape of quarterbacks, where if you're looking at Russell Wilson against all those other dudes, you'd be like, are they going to win 3 games and get out of the AFC? So I got his point. So I still feel fine about Pittsburgh. Again, even better after Baltimore. And then the toughness angle of all of this. Cleveland's interesting because I wasn't picking them because of the defense statistically across the board is really pretty bad. They're now 27th in opposing yards per play. But the defense is connected to the offense. And the offense for Cleveland has been so historically bad that I think eventually, even if you like the defensive personnel, it just starts to suffer. I have an example where the defense is connected to the offense. Let's bring it back to Jameis. We know he's the number 1 pick in 2015, 5-year starter in Tampa. In 2019, he throws 30 picks. The starting field position for the defense was consistently compromised. They were 29th in scoring defense. Brady comes in, they win the Super Bowl. A lot of the same roster, 8th in scoring defense. It's connected. So back to Jameis and his journey of likability, unlikability. New Orleans, I think people started to like him again. Man, that was a lot of picks in 19. But he was there 4 years, 10 starts, kind of in and out. Obviously gets hurt, celebrates in crutches, starts doing more quotes, eating dubs. You're like, what is going on with this guy? He goes to Cleveland. There's no way anybody was going to like him less than Deshaun Watson. So maybe that was part of it, but he's the backup again. Then he was actually the 3rd string behind DTR. When Watson tears his Achilles a month ago against Cincinnati, Watson actually is out. DTR comes in. He hurts his finger. So Winston actually was 3rd on the depth chart if you go back and look at that week. So here we are with Winston now, 4 starts in. He's got the Baltimore win, but you knew that almost death spiral pick was coming, and it did. Hamilton dropped it. 3 interceptions the next week against the Chargers. He throws for 395 on Sunday against New Orleans. But they were 3 of 13 on 3rd downs. They were 1 of 10 on 3rd downs last night, but they converted all 4 4th downs they went for. But last night, as this comeback story is building for the Browns and everybody's kind of feeling good about it, he's out there battling and his helmet gets broken and the thing's dangling on the 2-point conversion. It's like, man, is this kind of like a career comeback story or a Thursday night comeback story for Jameis? It felt like everybody was kind of celebrating it until Jameis started doing Jameis things again. The fumble, and then the interception on the 3rd down throw, where on the 2nd down throw prior to the 3rd down interception, he almost threw like the 2nd down throw, like, uh-oh, here we go. Like that was the appetizer. And then we got the real thing. But they went ahead with the game-winning drive. And when I think about Jameis and his popularity now, which again, I don't think has ever been higher, I don't know what it is. I mean, I have theories. Could it be that he's just not Deshaun Watson? That's probably a good place to start. Could it be that we have no expectations for him? So now it's not, hey, is this number one pick the guy for the next 10 years? Or, hey, it's just fun to see him out there because you have no idea what's going to happen, good or bad. And then he's going to say something that's just crazy. That would be really crazy if it were his first year. You'd be like, what's wrong with this guy? But there's a couple different rules that apply here. Like sometimes you can talk about the branding of something, whether it's branding of a college football team or the branding of somebody talking for a living, right? Like sometimes I'll watch Paul George and think, is he Tobias Harris with better branding? That's entirely unfair to Paul George, but I think you get my point. With Jameis, I'm not sure what that is. I don't know what that contemporary is, other than he benefits, again, from no one really caring what he is long-term anymore, and that you just know it's going to be fun for 3 hours. And the Charles Barkley rule applies. If you are yourself long enough, everyone else will catch up. And certainly that's the case with the Jameis post-game experience. Okay, I'm excited about this. Good to catch up with him again from Fox Sports, part of the college football season coverage. It's Brady Quinn, also part of Big Noon Kickoff, which I watch every Saturday live from Columbus this week for the big top 5 matchup this Saturday between Indiana and Ohio State on Fox. Catch Brady Quinn and the guys for pregame coverage from the shoe beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern on Fox. All right, man, let's do it all. What's up? How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. When I hear you read that, though, I feel like you said the big top 5 matchup is like how you won this, Sam, but you didn't say it that way in regards to maybe Indiana and where their ranking should be or should not be.
All right, so let's just start there because I know I was shocked how big of a deal that thing became. I have a general thought on the expansion of the conferences, messing up this 2 teams within the same conference having 2 entirely different experiences based on the scheduling because there's too many teams, and then expanding it out to 12. That I just think there's going to be seasons where you'll have a team who hasn't done anything. If 12-0 Indiana, which would be 13-0 or 12-1 with a loss to Oregon, if that exists on the resume, that it's an entirely different conversation. But yeah, with them at 5, not playing anybody, I just have a hard time with that. I would have a hard time with any school 10 games in having that kind of resume and being the 5th team in the country. That's
sure.
it.
And look, I think you could make the case maybe about Texas too. Like as you look at their schedule, what's their quality win? I mean, that's the tough one. Are we saying it's Vanderbilt and Vandy because Vandy's better this year? Are you saying it's Michigan at Michigan when we know Michigan's down? We saw Indiana beat them too. A little closer game, but still, like, comparatively speaking, I mean, I don't know. They don't have that, like, huge quality win on their resume either. So I think that's a tough part. Like, and that's a tough job for the committee because if you look at that committee right now, Ryan, I feel like they're more basing things off of, like, who they've lost to. Like, that's how they're kind of ranking some of this. Maybe they
Totally.
of Notre Dame because they might have the worst loss of any team within the top 20 for that matter. That being said, they've kicked the crap out of pretty much everyone else that they've played. They did go on the road to open the season and beat A&M. I think this is the hardest part about the conversations in regards to bias. Like we all have bias. I'll be the first to tell you. I look at Georgia and they have 2 losses right now. And I think you and I would both say we've watched them this year a lot. And when I break down the tape, I go, that team on its best day is still the best team in the country. Unfortunately, we've seen 2 circumstances where they have not played their best games and lost. We've seen other times where they've struggled at times and they haven't played up to their capabilities. I mean, their receivers and pass catchers, by and large have to me, dropped the ball literally and figuratively for them this season where they have not helped out Carson Beck. He shouldered a lot of the blame. That being said, part of my bias is based on what I've seen them do in the past. I think that's the tough part for a team like Indiana because we look at them and we're like, well, they've been a doormat with the exception of maybe like one season in recent history. And so we don't want to buy into what Kurt Cignetti has built, the fact that you could take a bunch of James Madison players and bring them up to the Big Ten and be competitive right away. But that's what they've been because outside of the close game versus Michigan, they beat the crap out of everyone too. I mean, we've watched them in the shoe where Ohio State played Nebraska, and I watched in Bloomington, Indiana played Nebraska. And I'll put it this way, man. Indiana was much more dominant start to finish in that game versus Nebraska than Ohio State was. So we can get into the nuances of comparing teams at this point. I think your point about the conferences is best taken because there's just so many that this is going to happen more often moving forward, where you have 18 teams. You're going to get a team that plays 7 of the 8 worst teams in the Big Ten. Like, that's going to happen. Now, we didn't know that Michigan, being the defending champs, would be down. We didn't know Washington, being the runner-up, would be down the way they are. They're dramatically different teams from where they were. But the likelihood of that sort of schedule happening is much more likely now with these bigger conferences. So I would preach to this. Like, can we all play the same amount of conference games? Like, can we just ask that of the SEC? Play 9 games like the Big Ten does? And then could we ask maybe some of these teams to not schedule FCS teams for non-conference and not schedule some of these other teams? Because if you're going to get the benefit of the doubt for the conference, parity, and the SEC being supposedly the most, the most parity, most competitive conference, then let's go ahead and make the scheduling more equal so we can at least have more of an apples to apples comparison. That's the only thing I'd ask at this point.
Yeah, I always get blamed of being this SEC homer despite going to Vermont, but my thing is...
A lot of you Vermont people just grew up rooting for the SEC, apparently.
I'll tell you, if there was a state that was like the South and the North, you could make some arguments about once you're outside of Burlington, it probably reminds some people of the South. It's just colder. But I can only go by you talk about these carryover things. I don't know who does this job without some assumptions from previous success.
Right.
To me, it's impossible. Like, you can pretend you're not doing it. Like, I'll never forget. I don't know if you'll remember him or not, but it was Doug Lesmerises, who used to be an AP vote. He may still be, okay? And I bring him up as there's nothing critical about it. I remember there was a Houston win in the very beginning of the season, and he just put Houston number 2 or 3. And his whole premise that he was trying to re-rank every week without any preconceived notion. And I was like, that is so admirable. Good for him. He's resetting the deck every Sunday night, and then he's sending in his vote. But the only reason you would take a team and move them from not ranked to ranked really high was because that you're really impressed with the preconceived notion of the team that they've beat.
Right.
So it's still all connected. So when I look at Texas and I watch a lot, I watch them and go, I think they're really good. I know Georgia kicked their ass, which also speaks to your Georgia point, because I don't know that there's many teams that would have gone into Texas and did to them what they did to that O-line. But if you're comparing Texas, because this got thrown at me a lot, it's well, how come you don't like Washington and Michigan? It's do we really have to go through the exercise of why Texas's conversation is different than Michigan and Washington when there's overhaul and they already have 1 million losses? Where Texas, if you're bringing back the O-line, the quarterback, the coaching staff, all of the receivers, the real only starting turnover is the guys on the defensive line. We know how well regarded so many of the other position guys are as far as their defense. I don't think that's some crazy assumption, despite your valid points about their schedule. I mean, it's just tough to get to 12 teams because if you go through it, you'd be like, okay, well, Notre Dame, you can play that game. What about Penn State? I mean, at least Penn State has, I guess, the Illinois win and an out-of-conference thing here with West Virginia, where I always feel like West Virginia is at least a competitive opponent.
No, and that's fair. I think the same argument you're making, though, for how different Michigan and Washington are this year, which is what I would say to any Indiana fan is well, look who we've beat so far as these quality wins. It's dude, there's different head coaches. They're different quarterbacks. It's different rosters. It's entirely different.
Washington's, I mean, anybody that throws the how come you don't like Washington versus dude, that's a different organization now. But I'm sorry to interrupt it, but it's so obvious. I don't even know why I'm explaining.
But Michigan is too, right? It's not Jim Harbaugh. Right. You don't have JJ McCarthy. You have a slew of other players who aren't there anymore. They had a dramatic, turnover on their roster to what's out there playing now too. So I think that's your counter argument to that. But I would also then say, well, so is Indiana. Outside of maybe Colorado, Indiana's the next team you look at the roster and say, well, they're not the same team they were last year either. And Curtis Warwick has been incredible within the system, and all the other, playmakers they've got on the outside, the kids who stepped up, the kids who came from James Madison. So you kind of can't look at them with the same bias you had in the past because it's not your same Indiana team that you're accustomed to seeing. When I watch them on film, I keep coming away, and I said this earlier in the season. We said it before the Nebraska game, after watching the Nebraska game, and after watching them versus Michigan. I'm like, dude, they're just a really well-coached team. Like of all the teams that I've watched this year, Indiana's got to be like top 2 or 3 as far as like everyone feels like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like you don't watch the tape and say, well, there's a blatant miscue, like some of the O-line's going the wrong way. There's a miscommunication or there's a missed assignment here. You just don't really see that. Like they play very solid, sound, fundamental football in every capacity. Now, the teams they've played, have they been beating, some of the best in the Big Ten or the best in the country in the non-conference? Of course not. But I think they've earned a right to be able to play for that. And they'll get a chance to, I think, if they beat Ohio State, obviously, or if they keep this thing close. And I'm okay with that because I don't want to take away from, and I guess the reason why I'm making an analogy, I want to compare to the March Madness. Look, it's way more teams, but percentage-wise, as far as how many basketball teams there are versus how many actually are up for a bid to the tournament. And then same thing, like the 12 out of the 134, which really, it's not really 134. Like the group of 5, you have so many less opportunities. There's one spot. So if we're looking at it from that standpoint, it's kind of fair. And like, I don't want to take away from what could be a team like TCU, who has this magical run. Maybe that's Indiana this year, and where everyone's questioning the whole season. They're like, are they good enough? Have they played a tough enough of schedule? Look, dude, they got to the national championship game. Like, there's room for that. I know they got blown out by Georgia. Obviously, they didn't play their best game, but that's part of college sports. Like, we should allow for these Cinderella stories to take place and not sit there and kind of scoff at them because of what their schedules look like. They didn't make the schedule, and they sure as hell didn't make the schedule to look the way it does. And all they've done is dominated for the most part, with the exception of their win versus Michigan, where it was a little bit tighter.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the TCU point, and I didn't have any issue with it at all. And when you compare that with what Indiana's doing, they beat 18th Oklahoma, 19th Kansas, number 8 Oklahoma State, number 17 Kansas State. They beat number 18 Texas. Indiana doesn't have any of that stuff. Right. Now, look, 12-0 Indiana, 12-1. Don't care. They're in. Totally fine with it. 11-1, I would have an issue with. But then again, it's 11-1. It's not in a vacuum. It's compared to what other options. I know probably I'd have to see the rest of it play out. Like, who knows? We're due for a couple weird upsets. The A&M Auburn spread makes me think, like, what the hell's going on? We know the Bama Auburn game is like the weirdest game, even when one looks like a powerhouse or whenever it's even. You never know what's going on there. Right. Like, we're due for a couple high pressure spots here. But I want to stay on Indiana in the matchup with Ohio State and kind of see where you're going with it. Because you're right. Like, I've watched probably, 3 full games of them. Rourke's been incredible. Ellison's Washington game, you're like, this guy
is good.
You're watching him and you're thinking, like, what was he doing at Wake? Then Kamara, the D lineman, I think it was the Michigan State game. Yeah. I was watching. So, he comes over to James Madison. Kurt has done a really, really good job with this group, but it's a funny Ohio State matchup because normally you'd think, okay, with their talent, they can do whatever they want, but they're down the 2 O-linemen. We know we don't trust their running game. I don't think they necessarily even trust their running game. So it's not like they're going to just line up and power, little Indiana around, because they haven't really done that to many teams at all. So let's go with it. Like, who are you picking in this one?
Well, I'm picking Ohio State, and it's because I think that the weakness for Ohio State that we talked about, the offensive line, and due to the injuries, is still something that I think they can overcome. And Chip Kelly I have a ton of respect for as an offensive-minded play caller, where he's just not going to allow that to beat them. And if you look at like their ability to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, those guys in space, Ryan Day, Chip Kelly always find ways in big games to do that. So I'm fully expecting that. And I think what it's going to come down to is, especially if Ohio State jumps on them early, a couple big plays here or there, it's going to force Indiana into an uncomfortable position. I mean, for the longest time, they never trailed this season. And so when you're not really accustomed to dealing with that, having to come back from it, especially on the road in that environment, that becomes pretty difficult. But I think the only way Indiana wins this game is if defensively they find a way of mixing up a lot of the fronts and the different pressures, or even types of pressures they kind of feint and look and then back out of, just to force more pressure on Carson Hinsman at center, Sarah Veld at the left guard spot, and then obviously Donovan Jackson. Because when we go back to the Ohio State-Penn State game, and one of the things that Ryan Day talked to us about why they put Hinsman next to Donovan Jackson and made that switch then, was because of the experience those two had together last year. There was the communication from the center to the left guard, and they wanted to replicate that again with Hinsman at left guard and then Donovan Jackson at left tackle. And that's powerful. Like, these are things that are nuances to the game that we don't always talk about on TV or even on a podcast. And it's important, especially for those guys up front. Well, now you've got a less experienced guy who's in between. And, Hinsman was playing much better at guard than he was last year at center. That's why Seth McLaughlin was in the first place, or they went and got him. And if you look at the splits too, which is really interesting to me, up until that Penn State game, they were almost 50-50 as far as their rush attempts based on direction, left or right. After they put in Hinsman and Donovan Jackson, they actually increased the amount. Almost 20% more of the rushes were to the left, to that side, which is it's kind of interesting to think you have two guys who are kind of playing out of position, and yet you're leaning on them more in this instance. So I think if they find a way, if Indiana finds a way of forcing more pressure on those guys before the snaps, stemming the front, mugging up some of those linebackers, showing them variations of a bear front, a 4-down front, all these different looks to them, I think that can maybe slow down some of that success they'll have running the football, some of their ability to protect too. I think Will Howard under pressure has struggled at times this year. So I would not be shocked at all if Kurt Signetti, kind of knowing his personality too, doesn't throw a little bit more of pressure and a variety of looks at him to see how he handles that. But the scary thing is like, you got to be careful because you put Jeremiah Smith in space or one-on-one or Emeka Egbuka, the game changes like that. And then I think on the flip side, they're going to have to find a way of creating some big plays. Indiana loves back shoulders. They love back shoulders because they don't have elite speed like Oregon did, right? Like you go back to Evan Stewart and you're going, holy cow. Like where was this guy up until that game that season for Oregon? Now he's blossomed and really kind of showed out. That was where Denzel Burke struggled. That's where the secondary for struggled versus Ohio State. Indiana does not have that type of speed. And that's one of the reasons why you see them constantly with a guy on their hip and they're kind of thrown to that back shoulder. Like I was at Notre Dame. This is not any disrespecting a lot of the guys I threw to. They're taller, bigger wide receivers, similar fashion. Like give them a 50-50 ball, give them a back shoulder, something where they plays to their advantage. Indiana's going to have to hit on those and be successful at those. And that's going to be tough to do versus Denzel Burke and Igmanosin too for Ohio State.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Because like even when you're going up against Ohio State, and by the way, like I love the Nebraska thing because it's close enough to go, okay, is this a hint? Is this like, are we falling for the brands again here that Indiana isn't capable? I wish this game were in Bloomington. I mean, I really wish this game were in Bloomington, just to add the other layer of like they're gonna find a way to pull this off. But what I see when I see Ohio State play this year is like, oh, hey, we got them on first down, or hey, we confused Will on second, or they got stuffed on 2 run plays. It's like, okay, now we're just going to throw it deep on the outside. Like the Northwestern game's hilarious because it's up 7-0. I mean, nobody thinks the Northwest is going to pull it off. And then it's just 5 possessions in a row. We're going to thank God to the rest of the country that they can't consistently run the football with like power.
Yeah.
Because if they had that element to them, then I don't think I'd pick anybody against that football
It's
team.
so weird to me too. And granted, there's obviously a rationale for it. I think, again, Chip Kelly's one of the smartest guys. When you sit down and talk to him about ball, like he completely gets it. People need to get rid of the preconceived notions, which whatever you think of his from his time at Philadelphia or whatever. But they actually run more counter than they do power, and I'm always like, it never makes any sense to me. I mean, I watched my cousin's high school football team, and they run counter all day, but then they don't run power. And I'm like, dude, power is your base play, and then you have counter off of that. You can't just run a counter without showing power to the front side or the strength of the formation. Like it doesn't make any conceptual sense.
Oh, doesn't it tell us something?
It tells you a lot of things, but I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to air out my cousin's high school coach. But the general point is they've run more counter than they have power this year. And then again, maybe they feel like that's the better side as far as getting some of those gap schemes involved. Could be a matchup. There's a lot of reasons for it. I want to pick out this though about Will Howard. He has really grown to feel a lot more comfortable within this system and how he's seeing some of these windows. Early on this season, it was entirely different. I felt like at times he was holding on to the football. He wasn't letting it go. There were 3 different examples that I was kind of combing through his throws this past week, and I could definitively show you, like, dude, this is anticipation. Like, this is like NFL level. Like, here's the zone coverage. Here's where the window is. Boom. And he puts it out there, and the guys are running right through it. He threw into Emeka. He threw into Jeremiah Smith. And he had a nice seam ball up to G. Scott, too, for a big gain. Was very kind of similar of like, that's the sort of timing and rhythm. He's starting to really feel really comfortable within the passing game of this offense. And that's a scary thing for Indiana because you don't want to play a ton of man-to-man versus this crew. So then if you play zone, you try to protect those corners and play more too high. I mean, he's getting to the point where I think Will Howard's starting to play his best football. And I think he can start to maybe pick you apart with some of the concepts they've implemented in.
Okay, I want to get to some other stuff there. So it sounds like we're both picking Ohio State here, but it's a respectful from you. And I don't think any Hoosiers fans are going to think that I'm respectful about the program. But is Notre Dame good?
Man, I do. I think they are good. I think the hard thing is you question like how does that happen against Northern Illinois? And it's obviously a fair question, but when you take into account like, hey, dude, it's your season opener. That it's a tough pill to swallow. And it's a team that's 7th in the MAC right now. Like they've really struggled too.
And it wasn't fluky. Like watching that game, like they just gashed him.
And so
what's
I mean,
going on?
I can give you a lot of reasons as to like my concerns, right? Of like, hey, it's the David Goliath, like it's the season opener. Yeah, you should be running out of that tunnel with your head on fire. But it's also not like I remember our, season openers. Like my freshman year, we played Washington State top 25 matchup. My sophomore year, we played for our home opener, Michigan. I think game day was there. It was like a top 5 matchup. My junior year, we played, we were on the road for 2 games. We came back, maybe played Michigan State or someone. Like they were bigger matchups. These were guys that like we were recruited with or against, all this stuff that it felt different. It's hard, I think, to get psyched up sometimes for like that MAC opponent, even though that shouldn't be the mindset. They should be saying, we're going to go stomp a mud hole. And then I'm going to go stat pad if I'm a quarterback to try to get my numbers up there versus these teams. But it did happen. And maybe it didn't because of, the offensive system, some moving parts in the offensive line and everything else that goes along with it. I mean, obviously the defense kept it a low scoring game. I thought they did enough. It's the offense not coming along. I also just simply chalk it up to this. These are 18 to 22, maybe 24-year-olds now. I mean, hell, Cam McCormick's like almost 30 at Miami. But my general point is, there's a lot of volatility there. Like when you look at your floor and ceiling, I think in college, it's like a lot wider than is the NFL. And that was one of those games that it's hard to not look at and go, well, we don't want that performance in the playoff, but it's also not the entire book on this team. If you look at everything else they've done, like the A&M win looks better and better. And then you look at some of the other wins they've had, they've been dominant. I mean, these teams haven't even been close. I don't think Army is going to be even close. I think they're going to beat the crap out of USC. So if that's the case, then like, are they good? Yeah, I think they're really good. I just think they happen to have probably one of the worst days that we've seen for a team in Notre Dame Stadium ever. And that happens.
Yeah. Look, I know the answer to it is you're good. It's kind of back to the Indiana thing. Like we can talk schedule all you want. To win 10 straight games is still hard because of the Northern Illinois example that we have. And maybe it's coming off the A&M thing because I thought that A&M game was just a grind, man. And then I thought they lost the game late. Like I was like, okay, this is the momentum has swung. This is not going to work out for this team opening night, see what they can do with the rest of the schedule. It's funny because a lot of the arguments, like whether it's about Indiana or it's about like some of the arguments end up being the same. And you can just replace the name of the team and be like, okay, well, we have to come up with 12 teams. Okay. We have to come up with 12. We can't put in 9 SEC teams. That's against the rules.
I mean, technically we have to come up with 8, right? Because you're going to have those 4 that are a part of it based on the 4 highest ranked conference champs. So we really have to come up with 8. And I think it's hard to come up with those 8 because of the language. Like you have a scenario where like Boise State, I think would have had maybe the bye this week, or they would have.
The Boise State has the bye because they're ahead of the Big 12 right now. And that's the kind of thing. But seriously, like when that plays out, if that were to happen, then I think the committee and all of college football goes, maybe we don't want that. Maybe we don't want to be that inclusive.
I also go back and forth, Ryan, about the automatic bids per conference. I know that's been a topic of conversation. Something like the SEC, Big Ten wanted to kind of like guarantee that. And there's a part of me that thinks like, yeah, that's actually, I know it becomes a little bit predictable, but A, we have that in the NFL. And then B, it actually strengthens the regular season. Like college football has always been a regular season sport. If you really go through the history of it, right? Like Notre Dame celebrating their 100th anniversary of their first consensus national championship back in 1924, where they stomped on Army or beat Army that year, went undefeated. Obviously, the Four Horsemen, they're part of that legendary story. But if you go back through like how we decided who was the national champion, it was like, AP. It's like, oh, voted play. Hey, this team looks like they're the best. And
just the AP. Go through it, man. I mean, there's all sorts of dudes handing out titles.
And that's the thing is you have like 3 teams who claimed a title in like certain years. So we've obviously evolved.
I think Princeton has a couple where they went 1-1.
Right.
Go ahead.
Right. Of course. Like they'll go ahead and, they don't won the national champion that or claim it. But the general point is we've come, such a long way from like kind of where we were. But
sure.
At the same point, there's like still those elements of it was about the regular season back then. Even as we build up to the BCS and even the 14 playoff, like I don't want us to lose the fact of like this still being the fun part about the season is, the regular season. Some of these different matchups we get between conferences and regions, et cetera. And I think the bigger the playoff gets and the more focus there is on the playoff, the less there is on some of those matchups. Having some of those automatic kind of bids might protect a little bit of that, where teams say, I know if I schedule a bunch of really tough non-conference opponents, it doesn't matter. Because in the end, as long as I win throughout my conference based on my conference play, I will get one of those automatic bids into the playoff. And that's ultimately what we're shooting for.
Okay. You have a team. See, I think we're more aligned here than maybe people would think before we started talking, because I don't like that it's like, well, I think Georgia would beat everybody. And it's like, okay, but eventually
we got to play the games, right?
Yeah. The losses have to cost something. I rank Georgia ahead of Indiana and Penn State in my completely irrelevant top 12. But I don't like the default of, well, Georgia would beat all these teams and Tennessee would beat all these teams and Bama would beat all these teams. Like, I think if you get Bama on the right weekend, of Milroe not having a good game, like we've already seen it. We've already seen it happen a couple of times. And it almost happened a third time against South Carolina. So again, I think we are a bit more aligned here, but it's just the chance. Maybe it's just me having to get caught up to the whole thing. Because I think, as you said, it being generally a regular season sport, that you got to show me one thing for me to feel like you're worthy of playing for a national championship.
Right.
Like, I think that's a really big deal. And that's a big time invite. And, the ACC being what it is this year, and then the Big 12, because there's even a little of the Big 10 scheduling thing going on in the Big 12, where if you look at Arizona State and Colorado, who are clearly, Arizona State's not even comparable to last year. And the same thing for Colorado. It's just that when you have maybe the best quarterback in college football, you should be a good football team. But there's some scheduling stuff going on there where you're like, okay, I guess Arizona State is now in the mix and control of what's coming forward to them. Do you feel like there's a definitive list, though, of like, if this team won a national championship, it's not a surprise? Is it Oregon? Is it Ohio State? Is it Georgia? Does the list stop after that? Like, how long would that list be for you where I'm like, I can't believe that team won a title?
I would throw Texas in there. As I said, those 4, I think, are pretty definitive. And if I had to go look at the odds or that, I think those would probably be the 4 top favorites.
You're probably right. I mean, I can look it up while we're doing this, but I think you nailed it. So you left out.
Like
Bama, do you think Penn State's
Bama would be probably part of it? But that's like a little bit of like the bias of what that team is.
Yeah.
But yeah. So to your point, anyone after those 4, you kind of go, yeah, it'd be surprising. Like the way Miami was able to remain undefeated for a period of time was surprising. It's like, okay, but there's always those Cinderella seasons, and where you kind of have that team of destiny that ends up finding their way, and maybe Miami would be that team, or maybe there's someone else you throw in the conversation. But I would say outside of those 4, I'd be very surprised if someone else won the national championship. But we don't know how the extended playoff is going to play. Maybe a team gets hot, getting to host a home playoff game and move through that. But to one of the points that you made, though, I would say this is one of the restructurings I'd love to see out of scheduling from here moving forward, since basically anything outside of the college football playoff, those bowl games have become irrelevant. So why don't we sit there and say, let's take those conference affiliations, move them to the non-conference schedule or portion of the beginning of the season, and start playing neutral site games at those bowl sites. Like why can't we do that? And it's so, one, it creates way bigger anticipation for those matchups because it's early in the season. Everything's still on the line for both those teams. You don't get the opt-out issue that we're going to have because of the transfer portal or the NFL. And it gives those sponsors, those venues, an opportunity to live somewhere. And I get there's an economic play to all of this, but there always isn't bowl games anyway. So that would be, to me, a better way of us preserving like some of these, like when you're saying, like, show me you beat someone or show me you played someone. There you go. Like, there's your example of how to do it from a business standpoint, but also a scheduling standpoint of how we could make it work. And I don't know why more of these bowls, especially the ones outside of what was the New Year's Six that are a part of the college football playoff, I don't know why they're not thinking about this or saying like, let's go find a place where we can live for the foreseeable future. Whereas right now, it feels like a lot of those bowls are starting to kind of pass by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue they're lucky they're even involved in this anymore because they're what held this up forever. But I like what you're saying. If it meant more marquee games, it'd be great. But if I'm an athletic director or I'm a coach with a lot of juice, I think we're learning once again that the committee doesn't really care about your schedule. Like, I don't know that I don't know that I would ever schedule. I don't think I'd go out of my way to schedule anybody with what I'm seeing again.
As of right now, yes. But I do think the committee does two things. Like right now, they're kind of grading some teams based on their losses, whatever. I don't think they care about anything until the then. I think ultimately they allow the schedule to set up, for example, because this doesn't necessarily play to like ESPN's advantage, but it plays to every TV network that has these top matchups. Like we can bill and sell Ohio State, Indiana as a top 5 matchup, even though you don't feel like Indiana's a top 5 team right now, right? But that's the billing, that's the intrigue, that's the anticipation. And that's good for college football. It's good for the Big Ten Conference. It's good for those teams and players. So there's an element, I think, of the scheduling where they kind of manipulate the rankings a little bit to help with their decision-making at the very end, if that makes sense. Like, I really don't care as much about the rankings till the final 2, because I think the one before that conference championship weekend gives you a much more accurate idea of how they feel about those fringe teams, because they're going to position those fringe teams in a spot where they will get bumped by a team that may very well have 3 losses that loses in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, that's a whole nother layer to it, because I really hope that the committee, I would like to see them recognize a team in the conference championship game more so than a team that doesn't. But we've already seen that play out, whether it was the BCS system, whether it was the 4-team system, where, you know, the Big 12 for years probably felt like the championship game hosed them.
Yeah.
So then they didn't want it. And then it was just like, well, whatever, everybody's doing it. So then they bring the whole thing back again.
Well, it was more the TCU Baylor. It was like their slogan was like one true champion, and they couldn't even figure it out. They had like a tie-break scenario.
Do you remember? Because Bryles was on the podium with the Big 12 commissioner, and he was just, because the Big 12's like a statement was like, yeah, they're both in, like hoping that they're going to pull something off. And you want to talk about brands and everything, like Baylor was right about it. They're just going, if this was Texas and Oklahoma, you wouldn't have done this.
Right.
And that's really hard for me to sit here and
the unfortunate part was like,
you're wrong.
Ohio State leaps up from 6-4, if I'm not mistaken. And they end up winning the whole thing. So then you're going, oh no, like maybe they were right.
Well, that was
right. They could have justified the committee's decision.
Yeah, I remember like back, Van Pelt and I were kind of like, we were on the phone. I don't even think we did the segment. And he was like, there's no way Ohio State, if they win this, is being left out in favor of this Baylor TCU thing. Because again, the Baylor TCU thing was weird because it was one of those classic, like one has the head-to-head, but the other team has the worst loss. It's like, well, so you're going to be rewarded because your loss to us is better than our loss. And I mean, it just gets, you end up kind of going in this circle where you kind of break your own rules and contradict yourself here a little bit. But
I think I hate it is, there's times too when like you watch a team, they sell their starters in the fourth quarter. I'm like, dude, you're up by 4 scores. Like this game is out of hand. 1, you're putting your players at risk to injury. And then 2, this is like the time you put in those younger guys who you want to see what you have in them in a real live game scenario. And I don't see that anymore. When we talk to coaches, they're very well aware now of the numbers they need to get to, or the fact that they need to win in impressive fashion, especially for those teams that feel like their resume isn't as strong, or if they've got a loss, they've got to make up for that. So that's one thing that I've kind of hated about all of this is like, not that people are box score reading, but there's an element of that of like, well, how bad did you really beat that team? Like, what's your scoring margin or margin of victory? How are we looking at the stats that go along with it? I do kind of hate that part of this whole process right now.
All right, I'll finish up here. Do you think Indiana's better than Penn State?
I don't.
Okay.
I've seen both, and I think that in large part comes to a couple of things. I think both running backs at Penn State are better. I think the offensive line is probably a little bit better too. Defensively, I think they are and look, we're going to find out this weekend, so I could be completely wrong. But I thought their ability to match up, and their secondary is probably the weakest part, or I should say most inexperienced part of that group for Penn State this year coming into the season. I thought that team matched up better with Ohio State than Indiana does. So, look, tough comparison because Indiana's got to do it on the road. But like I said, I don't know how close this game will be when it's all said and done.
So you have 11-1 Indiana in.
Yes, they'll be on the road, but they'd be in.
Okay. I likely would not. But then again, I still have to look at the other stuff that happens because any of us just chalking it out the next couple of weeks in conference championship games would be a huge mistake that we've all made every single year. Before I let you go, are you as surprised as I am that our good friend Tommy Rees is not on an NFL roster?
What do you mean?
As a quarterback? Is he seasoned? As he's gotten
I mean, he's coaching. He's in Cleveland. He's the tight ends coach.
Yeah, I know he is, but they've had some health issues at quarterback. They're just,
oh, come on.
I really like.
I love Tommy, but shoot, I mean, I'm a big advocate for Jameis. Like, not just watching what he did on Thursday night, but I thought before the season, I'm looking at a team like Las Vegas. I'm like, wait a second. Like, you could trade for this dude. Like, why don't you go bring Jameis in, or some of these other teams that I think they could have used Jameis, or he would have been an upgrade based on a quarterback situation. So I think I'm not going to answer that. I love Tommy, but they've got a bunch of pro guys on their roster right now.
Fair enough. Well said. Again, you can see Brady Quinn on Big Noon Kickoff. I love watching every Saturday. You guys are going to be from the shoe for a game that has as much anticipation for it as maybe any game this regular season.
I need your cell so I can text you at some point during the game and just get your live in the moment, get your thoughts on it. Because I want to feel like whatever that is. Like if Indiana's up by 10 points and you're like, holy hell, maybe they are. I mean, that's what this comes down to, right? Like we still at this point are 10 games in the season. We don't know how good Indiana is. I think they're good. I just don't know how good. Look, if they beat Ohio State and Columbus, I think we can anoint them that stating the obvious. But if they play them close, I don't know. I think what they've done this year, if this game is close, and it's not 56-7, I think Indiana should be a part of the playoff.
We'll see. Because if it ends up being a 28-21 and it'll be like that box score, hey, they held them to one score. But there's also games where I'll watch and go, this team was completely in control and so much better. But I don't go into this I think Indiana's just awful. I've never said that.
Right.
I just, to the resume thing that we've already covered a million times, and I somehow got it in 3 episodes all this week. I'll give you that cell when we're done here.
Kudos to you. You really created a storm. A crap storm.
I couldn't believe it.
That's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's good for college football. That's the thing. That's what makes this fun. People get to debate and talk about it, and that's part of the love of the game.
I also think it proved not many people had been paying attention to who they were playing in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Because then I saw a bunch of pieces. I hate the argument of, well, what are you supposed to do? You can only play who's in front of you. That's what I would say if I had a bad schedule too. But I can't wait, man. I cannot wait for this game. I'm even staying. I'm getting to bed early tonight. Just rested, gym in the morning, and then right to the shoe.
South Bay bro, man. You, Stoner, Feldman, Liner, all you South Bay bros. It's gym, tank top, flip flops. Watch some football, baby. Let's go.
I know. I can't. I might pick out a new tank just for this. Thanks, man. Appreciate the time. Awesome job this season. I love you guys.
That's right.
The Alliance marches on. Okay. Didn't get it last week.
What?
Yeah, I know. How about those Johnnies though last night? You upset?
I'm so sad. I threw on a Life is Good shirt just to try to cheer myself up. That was tough.
Nice.
Man.
That'll do it.
That was tough.
I bet it worked though.
Yeah, it's a little bit
Life
better
is
than
good.
It was 10 minutes ago, but not quite there.
We'll get there. Okay. Oregon is just a beast. So I feel like the board is his, but he hinted at what he was going to do last week. And now there's a discussion about it. So let's do this. Why don't Ceruti and Kyle go first, and then Oregon and I will figure out our strategy.
Yeah, just so everyone's clear, Wargon 9-3. He's hit 4 straight. I've also hit 4 straight, 7-5. Kyle 6-6, and Ryan is 3-9.
Does
So,
Todd
I started
McShay need a
2-0.
co-host? Like, that would be a great spot for you, I feel like.
Would love that.
All right. What do we got, Kyle?
All right, go ahead, Kyle.
Well, everybody on CBSSports.com likes Colorado, and that's good enough for me. So I'm going to take the Colorado money line.
Okay.
What's funny about that is everybody, I feel like, on the Action Network likes Kansas. So we're just battling each other out.
Well, we don't.
That's a
mess with
tough
the
one
Action
because
Network.
Kansas posts that BYU win. But Kansas has been in like all of these games this year. They started, 1-5? So
I don't know.
You got that
CBS
quarterback
likes it. Why
recruit,
not?
though. You know?
wait,
Colorado feeling
whatever
good.
Wargon's saying, people probably want to hear. What was that, Wargon?
If CBS likes it, why not? That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Don't patronize me. Your 9 wins or whatever you got. I don't need this shit.
All right. Ceruti?
I'm going to go Ole Miss. I'm going to take it down to the all -6.5, so get it under a touchdown. Coming off a bye, off the Georgia win. Florida coming off the LSU win. I know it's at Florida. I just think Ole Miss is way better. I don't really believe in this Florida team. So give me Ole Miss to win by a touchdown or more.
Okay. All right. So, Wargon, you had hinted that you were just going to tease down Ohio State because that's what you're supposed to do against Indiana. But it sounds like you're wavering a bit. So if you want Ohio State, you certainly can have it. I just wanted to know what you're doing first.
Right. I was looking for a way to bet against Indiana. Ohio State -6.5, I still think is going to hit. I was looking at Alabama -7.5 against Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma kind of sucks. This is kind of a easy spot for Alabama. And then I like Georgia -38.5 against UMass.
Just fire their coach.
Only because they just canceled their senior day. They don't get individual announcements at senior day. Fuck them. I like Georgia. I like the storyline there. I think I'm going to go Ohio State -6.5. It's just too good. Indiana's not good. We've been talking about it for weeks. I don't think they're not. I don't think they're bad. I just don't think they're as good as Ohio State.
I don't think they're bad. I've watched 3 full Indiana games. I would say Iowa in 15. It's funny when it's like, do you even watch the games? Watching Iowa in that Wisconsin game 10 years ago was what had kind of set the table for me to be like, don't buy into them. And then they were much better in the Michigan State game. So I actually feel better about Indiana against their schedule than other teams. But I don't need to repeat my
I didn't
position.
love the way they looked
it's
versus
well
Michigan.
No, I mean, they get down 10-0. But all right. I probably shouldn't pick that game, so I'm glad Wargon did.
I was kind of hoping you would just either way.
I know
I
you
would have been kind of gold. Like if you just were like, "Fuck it," I just ride the Indiana hate train, or if you just took Indiana, which would be great too. Just
Can't lose.
But see, it's never about. I don't hate Indiana at all.
No, I know you. I know.
It has nothing to do with that. It is. If there were a team anywhere else in the country, and it's going to happen with what we have. But again, everybody's heard my position from this. I've campaigned long enough. All right. Okay. Ohio State down the center now. Who knows what the conditions could be? Because this is different. The Buckeyes' power run game doesn't really exist. I was almost thinking of taking it the other way and seeing if we can middle it.
Can we not do that?
Yeah.
Could we do literally anything but that? Is that a possibility?
We won't do it. I don't even know if we're allowed to do it.
We can.
And if there's somebody that shouldn't be getting cute right now, it's me. So that A&M Auburn line is so stinky that I wouldn't even do anything with it because that one's tough. The Kansas BYU thing, post BYU game, scares me and trying to get a read on that one whatsoever. So why don't we go Penn State? It's -10.5 in Minnesota. So what do we get? 7.5. That's so pathetic that even with the help, it's going this bad.
Those are 2 Wargon staple teams, right? Minnesota and Penn State. This
is even worse. I could be drafting off of Wargon's Penn State position that wins every week, and then I do it. Don't take the Ohio State.
That lines up
game
to 11.5 now.
Let's give you 6.5.
He's oofing. This isn't good.
Ooh, so we're just giving you some extra juice.
It's close. It's close to the threshold, but we're gonna give it to you because we need the touchdown. I feel like touchdown's safe. So if we do Ole Miss to win by a touchdown, if we do Colorado money line, Ohio State to win by a touchdown, and Penn State to win by a touchdown, that's plus 445, boys.
It's like helping your dad into a restaurant. I don't love that.
All
but I'm
favorites
taking
can go wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So what was it again?
Plus 445. Ole Miss minus 6.5. Colorado money line. Ohio State minus 6.5, and Penn State minus 6.5.
Okay. Good luck. Okay, let's couch money research you before we say goodbye to you. All right. I'm going with my couch pick, Green Bay -3 against my Niners. I know it's tough emotionally for me. The money, 89% of the public money is on Tampa. So that means you're on the Giants without Daniel Jones, even on the roster. You won't have me to kick around anymore. Giants, let's see the latest number because I put this one in earlier this morning. It's +6. And we continue to scroll. Oh, we're at +5.5. All right. Well, I could be a stickler here and say, well, when I gave it out, but let's, it's been too easy this year, so let's not take any favor. +5.5 and research again. The smarter people seem to like the Colts +7.5 at home against the Lions. Really, really sharp side this year, the Colts. Feels like it's every other week with them. Okay. Enjoy.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
Life advice, rr@gmail.com. That is the email address. We've got Kyle, we've got Steve, Wargon monitoring in the background. Little feedback here. I'm a backflip guy. Dan, 43, no real gym stats. I mostly mountain bike. Former wrestler, so no basketball comp either. A couple weeks ago, Kyle had a throwaway line about someone being a backflip guy. As a backflip guy myself, I can say it's a pretty solid move. Backflip guy instantly differentiates himself from the crowd. You obviously don't want backflips to be your only redeeming quality, but as a starting point, it's about as good as you could hope for. At 43, I'm starting to lose the standing backflip and backflip off a wall, but I still have the round off backflip and can rock a trampoline. Love the show. Shout out to all the backflip guys out there listening.
The backflip bros. Let's go.
Yeah, I feel like the older you get, the more your peers dislike that you're the backflip guy. I think when you're like the peak is probably middle school or early high school. You're like, man, who knows what that guy's capable of? Did you see what he just did at the pep rally? But I don't know, when you're like 40 and you're like, it's like, oh yeah, Todd's going to do a backflip. Minus 400 odds that he's going to do. It's like fucking douchebag. But I think it's cool. But I can see how your peers might lose a little luster and get them to turn against you instead of being like in awe of you. But I think in high school, it's the coolest thing you could do.
It's kind of like the guy who, pulls out the guitar and goes acoustic after dark on you. It's like, oh man, we're doing this again.
It's more impressive than that, but you're like, oh yeah, he's going to use his go-to move. Cool.
I would agree. It is more impressive. So I had one of my best friends, Jeremy. He was a gymnast. He is he's still alive. His screen name was Jared do a backflip 50. He was big time backflip guy.
His entire identity.
Guy. It kind of was. He's also the guy that called everyone virgins when we went to that college party. Good times.
Well, he's honest.
Interesting dude. Yeah. But he kind of
did he get away with it because he could backflip?
I don't know that he got away with it. It was kind of cool. But again, he was a gymnast, so it was like kind of expected. So, but he did grow out of it as an adult. I haven't seen him do a backflip in a while, so good for him.
Yeah, the guitar thing's a good call. I mean, I had a buddy because I attempted to teach myself how to do this John Fahey finger picking style. Don't worry, no one's getting that reference. And Ed Quinn was over. And he's obviously, a musician, and was like, what's going on over here? And of course, whenever anybody strums it and they know what they're doing, they're like, your guitar's out of tune. I'm like, actually, it's open C tuning. And I was like, well, let me show you. And then I started playing it a little bit, trying to show him the thing I was doing. And then I just said, I'm not really comfortable right now. Just you and I in my living room and me with a guitar looking at you while I try to play this. And he was like, I'm glad you're going to stop. I was like, cool. I'm just going to put it away. So it's not really a backflip. Yeah, it's not a backflip. It kind of reminds you just of Hartford Pete. Hartford Pete, my roommate back in college, he really, really great musician. But if there was a piano around, he would play it. And pianos are generally stationary, and people would have somewhere else to go. we've brought this up before, but you would just have to leave him. Like, if there were a piano there, he would sit down, he would play. I would probably hope some chicks would check it out. And we'd be like, hey, we need to go. And he just wouldn't. And so you would just have to like go to the parking lot and leave.
Yeah, well, that's tough. I mean, if he stays there, he stays there. But if I see a piano and it's acceptable, like I might bang out a little Pirates of the Caribbean, see if I can remember how to do Star Wars.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think it's one of those things where if you don't have the proper form, you can still kind of pull off Pirates of the Caribbean once you figure out which one of those black keys you got to hit. It's a nice thing, and it's over in like 30 seconds. And people are like, wow, that was cool. But
yeah, I remember we got a keyboard, and one of the guys got a keyboard in college. And then some dude started like YouTubing how to play Coldplay songs. And to Ryan's Ed Quinn thing, it was like, this is kind of weird. Maybe we should stop doing this. Yeah, it was a phase. It's okay.
All right.
Was there a question in this email?
No, not at all.
Just a backflip guy. And I think we didn't give him enough credit for still being able to do a backflip. So sorry about that one. That's cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've always
that you're still even trying it with 40-year-old.
Have you guys tried to do a backflip? Like, just you've tried in life, right? I would assume. Like, you think you're like, oh, it's not that hard, and then you just fall flat on your head because you can't rotate.
Yeah, trampoline's closest I've got.
Doesn't count.
I used to do front flips into a pool.
Yeah, that too.
But
off a diving board or like?
No, just off of it.
Off the side ledge.
Yeah.
I think I needed a diving board.
So I tried to do a backflip once, I think, into a pool, and I broke my nose with my kneecap. Parents.
The cool thing when we were I was growing up was like, you guys do gainers off diving boards?
Jackknifes?
No, like the gainers, like when you run forward but do the backflip, and it's like kind of terrifying.
I don't.
Yeah, that was the big
thing.
I don't
have the spatial awareness to try that. Never did, actually.
Don't you have to scream gainer too when you do it?
Probably, yeah.
It's like calling it off the glass or it didn't count.
True.
I just feel like I'm thinking of like Along Came Polly, and then thinking about Philip Seymour Hoffman screaming
Rain Man. Yeah.
Did he do that in a movie? I don't know. All right. Joining the wrong Jim. Russillo, please help. Ryan, longtime listener, first-time emailer. Jim's stats are respectable, but nothing to write home about. Pickup comp would be a shorter and slower Kirk Heinrich. Heinrich could ball, dude. I've been going to the gym consistently 5 times per week for over a decade and been a member of many different gyms as I've moved around a bit. I've made a massive mistake at the gym I've joined. I live up just the coast from you and belong to a gym called Redacted. All right, so he's not going to tell us the name. Not sure if you've heard of this place. He does give me the name, but I've not heard of it. I didn't know anything about this. This may as well be the Live nightclub in Miami. I'm only 31, but I feel like I'm 65 in this place. It is louder than any gym I've ever been to, and a tripod is a necessary accessory. Ooh. They have a live DJ during most of the times I have free to go to the gym. Pretty sure I've been in a few influencers' videos inadvertently. The problem is I signed a year contract with this place, but I can't stand the thought of continuing to work out here. I've tried it for 6 months, can't do it anymore. What's the best approach to try to get out of it? My only thought so far is to try to get a doctor's note saying my ears are messed up from the live DJs playing. They are opening an Equinox in the Palisades next month, so I'm thinking about joining that as they're offering discounted rates. As a loyal member of Equinox, Russillo, how would you recommend I proceed? How would you describe your Equinox experience? My favorite gym I belong to so far is a Lifetime Athletic Country Club that had a ton of amenities for reference. I love Equinox just because I can go to another Equinox in other cities when I'm traveling. Like, that's my favorite part of it. It was actually pretty funny, but I was so excited to join Equinox that when I knew I was leaving ESPN radio, and it was like right at the end, I think the week I left, I drove down to Greenwich, Connecticut and joined from West Hartford and then worked out. And they're like, go see you around. I was like, not really. I'm moving to LA. I just wanted to start the process because I think I had to be in New York. I joined. I don't know if it's Stanford or Greenwich. I could be getting it wrong, but whatever it was, I drove from West Hartford down there just to join because I knew I had trips coming up and then I'd be in LA. And I was like, I just want to start the process. That was like my present to myself. Loser. Anyway, I like Equinox a lot. So I don't know why you have to be so worried about this. Just go up to him and go, this doesn't work for me. All right. I mean, it's a business. And maybe they'll try to jam you the first time through, like whenever you put in an insurance claim, but go a second time. I have no doubt that you can wear down a business like this where you go, this does not work for me. I don't want to pay the rest of the year. I cannot wait to quit. I hate it here. It's not a fit. And what are they going to say? Sorry, you paid. I mean, they may say it the first or second time. You just keep working your way up the ladder. It depends on how important the money is to you. Some other people wouldn't care about the money. But I'm fighting for you here because this sounds fucking terrible. I imagine that all the loose benches are storage units and not benches. I imagine they use the flat benches as hip thrusters, not realizing that that's not what they're there for. Yeah, I hate this place. I hate this place. I hate it for you. So go in fierce. Show no potential swaying. When they go, well, maybe you give it another month or come at a different time of day, or maybe we can think it out. Be stout in your position and just go, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I was just doing a quick Google to see if there was there's like timeshare lawyers like, hey, I really screwed this up. Do you think you could help that? I don't really see anything for
Can't imagine it's
gym.
super lucrative.
Yeah. For gym
what are we saving here?
I wonder, is there one of those things?
So minus the $120 that you owe me. Here is. Go ahead.
You're actually worse off now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot. I just did a quick Google here. Can I sue my gym membership? I don't think they've really done anything. So yeah, I think, like you said, just don't waver and just get past the person whose job it is to say no, and then maybe get to the person whose job it is to say why. So I don't know.
Why don't you just take your shirt off at it? You go the other way, try to get thrown out.
Right, ruin 7 TikTok videos a day.
Yeah,
and just wait until
go headbands, goggles, shirts off, oiled up. Don't towel down any machines. You just start screaming, Gainer. I don't know. There's not much else there.
I don't have much on this. So
yeah,
I have a good one really quickly if you guys have time. My buddy texted this to the group last night. I know we don't usually do I guess call-in ones, but
yeah.
So my buddy was at a bar last night. I think you guys will like this one. My buddy was at a bar last night. That was like a work thing, and he had been buying drinks all night, tipping cash, and it was late. He bought a Sun Cruiser, which is I think it's like an iced tea, a spiked iced tea type deal. It's a canned drink.
Never heard of
that. Is that what it's called?
Sun Cruiser, I think. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. People love those. They were a big part of the Pinehurst week.
Yeah, they're good. I think that's what it's called.
I don't think it is.
Not terribly important.
Something else. Well, it kind of is to them.
Well, they're not sponsored this podcast. So.
No, true. But I mean, hold on. I'll get the name right, but keep going.
Anyway, so it was like last drink of the night. He buys a Sun Cruiser. It's like a $9 drink, which is insane. In a can.
Positive
and he leaves a $1 tip. Leaves a $1 tip. Thanks,
It
Ryan.
is a Sun Cruiser. I'm sorry.
I've been listening to you the whole time, Ceruti, so you can continue right where you left off.
It. Leaves a $1 tip. Guy out of nowhere, just like sitting at the bar, goes, "That's it, bro."
Patron at the bar? Some
guy, yeah. And he was like, "Really? It's like a canned drink, man. Like, what do you want me to do?" And the girl is behind the bar. My buddy's like, she's clearly embarrassed. And my friend was like, I don't know if he was like kind of simping a little bit, or he didn't seem like they were together, but maybe he was like interested in the bartender. So he ends up like being like, "All right, here's a $5, dude. I don't really need it." And the bartender was like, no, don't just take it. I don't need this. Clearly embarrassed. But my friend was like, no, this is yours now. And he's like, was I the asshole for leaving a $1 tip on a canned drink? And my whole philosophy and most of my life has been like, if it's a canned drink, it's $1.
It's $1.
Multiply it by how many you get, but he got one canned drink. So, basically that's the situation. Like, was he in the wrong? Which I don't think so, but.
No, and he was tipping cash all night. So he's doing the right thing by all stretches of imagination.
What are you saying?
So that's one guy who's probably planted in the middle of the bar, has been talking to this woman as she passes left and right, getting his jokes ready, and probably like, oh, look at this guy, I'm cooler than So no, that's one guy who's out of touch and probably is doing the bar wrong anyway. So no, that's your guy, stand your ground. One can is $1. That's how it works.
Yeah, your friend's totally right. The other guy's an asshole. I can't monitoring other people with that. And it was $1 in a can. Yeah. All right. This one's different. 5'10", 170, 33-year-old girl dad, 2 of them, no gym stats, ball comp.
What's up?
Doug Eater without the mustache. Pretty simple one here. My family and I live in a standard suburban neighborhood with houses 10 feet apart. So over the last month or so, our direct side neighbor has changed their fabric softener and or dryer sheets, and it smells horrible. Their dryer exhaust opens directly towards our house and funkifies our outdoor space on the regular. Worse yet, they seem to be the daily laundry type of household. I've waited patiently to see if this was a temporary shift, but nope, it seems to be the new normal. Is this a topic that can possibly be broached with the neighbors? The husband is Jack and easily could put me in my place, but he's fairly gentle-minded and his lended tools helps with tasks in the past. They tend to run the machine right after I get home from work when I like to play outside with my kids, but practicing t-ball while gagging on the smell has proven tiresome. What say the boys on this issue? Do I have a case or should I suck it up and deal? Thanks for your advice. Man, that's tough because I'll admit every now and then, like you smell a nice dryer sheet in a compressed community.
I enjoy it.
Yeah, right. I'm not crazy. Thank you, Kyle. You're like, what's that in the air? The changing of the leaves? Autumn
Clean
upon us? No. Crisp linen. Chemicals. Let's get a whiff, kids. I think it's so crazy that it might be kind of funny, the fact that that you have some kind of relationship with the guy, maybe that he's so jacked and tough, he's just totally secure with himself. And he's like, no, I don't feel like I have to fight this guy because he's talking about my dryer vent exhaust. It sounds like it's probably dryer vent. And I don't think it'd be a fabric softener thing. I don't know. Not an HVAC guy. But that is, I think it's so funny and so strange that I think you should be like, hey, this is going to sound crazy, but... Now, granted, I don't know what the routine is.
You can I pay for someone to go clear out your tubes, or is it like, do you think you could use this brand of dryer sheet? Because I was just thinking, what if it's food? What if this was food, and you're like, on Wednesdays when you guys are experimenting,
doesn't work.
You know what I mean? Then it doesn't work. You're like, I just kind of hate the smell that comes out of
Curry
your house.
night sucks,
right? Like,
Dave.
Can you say that? Not really. People be like, get the fuck off my lawn, like.
Yeah.
So your idea that this maybe is so crazy, that this plan is so crazy it just might work, maybe. I just think that you could view it as like everything else. Like, I don't like what's coming over your fence for this reason, or I don't like it for that reason. So I think it's both like, sorry, that's like, this is going to stay in the confines of my property here. But I don't know. I probably wouldn't say anything, but I don't know if you wanted to get funny about it. Maybe it works.
See, I don't think... I think this is kind of straightforward. One, there might be something wrong. You could be doing the guy a favor.
You could say
clear
it like
out
that.
Yeah, you could, or to
Very
your
smart
point, Kyle. You know how the people come by and they're like, "Hey, we're doing the windows in the neighborhood. Wanted to know if you wanted in next weekend." Like, maybe just get the dryer vent guy to come out and clear out everybody. You just make it like it's your thing, but you're also helping out your neighbors, and that ends up clearing his thing because like there's a good chance it didn't smell, but maybe something's stuck in there. Who knows? Like, you could be doing this guy a favor. So I actually don't think it's an asshole move. You might be helping him out.
I love it. I think that's the way to do it.
You've just been smelling essence of raccoon or something.
But
last 2 weeks.
If it is just a straight up change of dryer sheet, then cleaning out the vent may not solve the problem.
There's no way a dryer sheet makes that big of a difference, though, right?
Dude, their
Yeah,
whole
what if our
job is to
emailer's
smell
wrong?
good. How could it
And
be? How could the company that makes that dryer sheet fuck up so bad where the neighbor is like queasy when he smells
you guys
it in
ever
the outside air?
Stuck your toe into the organic world of dryer sheets?
No, is it really bad?
There's a lot of stuff going on out there, and I don't know that any of it works.
Is it like musky? Like what the
Sandalwood?
Yeah, I have a full pack right over here. We
got
don't
burned
I don't
by
use
some
them.
bad dryer sheets. Oh no,
I don't use them. Rather
Do
not
they
use dryer
stink
sheets.
bad?
They don't do anything, and yeah, like I don't even like the way that they make my clothes feel in the dryer. Like, it's a noticeable difference. So they're just, again, I think this might have been a mother-in-law purchase. We talked about the deodorant thing. That's just kind of her thing. It's okay.
I just found out about dryer sheets like 6 years ago.
Like, in general,
Yeah. Well, I
I've
mean,
been
I knew
using
they
these balls.
existed.
Been using these dryer balls. That's been pretty.
they're
No.
apparently not very good for you. But I don't know.
Dryer
Well,
sheets.
chalk
What
it
is
up.
good for you?
Get
We
the
haven't
fuck
done the
outta here.
aluminum deodorant truth all yet. So, yeah, Sarah Walsh and Matt Bushman were staying at my house when I wasn't here once. And I just gave them the keys. I was like, go for it. I was out of town. And she was like, you don't have dryer sheets? I was like, what am I, a virgin?
I love
She
dryer
bought
sheets. When I use
Yeah,
them,
no,
when I'm out and
I
I got to do
agree.
a load, it's really, I'm like, this is wrong. Something's wrong here. So
I agree. But
Yeah, I don't think we helped anybody again today.
I think we helped the last guy. Yeah. Anyway, all right.
Talk to your Jim.
No,
Ask
that's
if he
the
wants
last
to
guy.
Oh. Well, the problem is I if it isn't the vent, but I love your idea. Back door, because there's also a version of this where if you go to him and you're like, hey, this is going to sound weird. I'm out here with my kids. And like right when it happens, he's going to just go right to his wife and be like, oh, that psycho next door said,
right.
Exactly. Now you're not getting the tools. He's not helping you with some general tasks. So I would try to like
blower. Yeah.
outflank him with, hey, I've got the vent people coming over or whatever. Like, have you noticed you're smelling weird lately? Like, yeah, we're playing.
Yeah, when it's
T-Wire.
running, maybe knock on the door and be like, hey, do you want to get out here and get a whiff of this? Because like I'm not making this up.
But I would say like, hey, I'm having him come by, but have you get a whiff of this whole thing? What if he's out there? He's like, it smells awesome.
Yeah, what are you talking about, dude?
You're gonna have to buy your kids a PS5. Be like, we don't play outside anymore. Your career's over. It's too awkward. Okay, that's life advice. Thanks to Ceruti, thanks to Kyle, and thanks to Wargon. Good luck to everyone, just in general. Check out our podcast on YouTube and subscribe. Ringer Spotify.